Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. Today I want to talk about negotiating with lenders because this is the biggest single question that we get every single deal we do. It's talking about negotiating with lenders at the front end, talking about negotiating with lenders at the sort of midpoint, and negotiating with lenders at the exit. So I've got 5 key points, which has kind of been a running theme of the last few episodes. So I'm going to talk through those and hopefully cover off some myths and debunk some myths around negotiating with lenders, because a lot of people think that everything that a lender says is set in stone, and it's really not. We've pulled off some pretty insane negotiations over the years with lenders, to the point of getting them to reduce their exit figures, getting them to defer payments, getting them to renegotiate mid-deal and increase their facilities. Like there's a few examples where we've done some pretty cool stuff with lenders actually, and it just shows that they are open to negotiating. So the first key point is when and why you might need to renegotiate your loan terms. So there are 3 points. So there are 3 stages where you may need to do some renegotiation. So the first one is on getting into the loan. So as a broker, or as your broker, we would sit and we would do all of that negotiation for you. So rest assured that when you get the terms from the lender, they are the best possible terms that lender could have done, because we will fight tooth and nail for every single little tiny bit of interest that we can get off, even if it's getting a deal from 0.89% down to 0.88. Like we will fight for that little percentage off, because every little bit we can get off helps later down the line. So that first stage, negotiation on the entry, that's like where we do our magic. At the midpoint is where I always say that's where we earn our fees, because a lot of people, they get a bit funny about paying broker fees or that kind of thing. I don't know why. I've never understood it myself personally. I think you would pay a solicitor. Why wouldn't you pay a broker? The difference with sort of saying that we earn our fees in the middle and rather than the start is because on that start bit, kind of everyone's fighting for the deal. Everyone wants to be involved in the deal. That's kind of our easiest work. In the middle, where you are 6 months into a development that's going wrong, you're up against a lender that wants to pull the plug, you feel like you're on your own, and then you turn to us and you say, get me out of this. That's where we earn our money. We have got people out of some horrific situations, to the point of, like, we've refinanced people who are actively insolvent in order to try and get them out of a hole. We've just done that on 3 sites, actually. We've dealt with people who are literally a day or 2 away from repossession, where we've managed to negotiate extensions with lenders. We've got people who are making huge losses and PGs potentially coming in, to being able to do big restructures and being able to essentially get everyone back on board and avoid them having those PGs called in. So there's been some really big negotiations. So that midpoint is absolutely where we're going to make our money and prove our worth, because kind of we hope you never need us, but when you do, yeah, we're going to knock it out of the park. Then the third stage of negotiation is on the exit. So again, a lot of people think that a lender's exit cost is like set in stone, that their redemption figure is set in stone. However, if you are exiting early, or if you are, maybe you've gone over by 3 months and you're in the process of exiting, there is going to be negotiation. We have had people who have had 100 grand knocked off their redemption figure because we're paying back early. We've had people who've had 100 grand knocked off their redemption figure because they're late paying back, and we needed to negotiate that 100 grand off in order to get a new lender on board. We have had lenders who have offered to defer 50 grand. So we got the client to pay them back as much as they could, and then they deferred 50 grand to the sale of a next site. We've had all sorts. And I think kind of the key point I want to make about this is there's always room for negotiation. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not always going to be successful, but there's always going to be room for some negotiation. So there'll always be a point where a lender is happy to have a discussion. And I think that's pretty key. You need to keep that in mind, that lenders are always going to be happy to have a discussion. The second key point that I want to talk about is how to prepare for that conversation. So first things first, talk to your broker. So you come to us and you say, right, I'm having a struggle here. Something's going wrong. I need to renegotiate the terms. Right, okay, we will sit with you. We will come up with the best strategy of approaching that lender. We will say, right, okay, let's think about putting it like this. Let's frame it like this. Let's talk to another lender, get these terms on the table, because then we've got something to go to that lender with. It's about framing everything so that when you go to that lender and you say, we've run over, we need to do this, we need to do that, you've got the answers there already. There's nothing worse than going to a lender and saying, we need an extension, but we don't know how we're going to exit it. Because from a lender's perspective, that doesn't instill confidence. So keeping that communication completely transparent, keeping it very solutions driven is also key as well. So when preparing to speak to those lenders, it really is just a case of preparing everything possible to go to the lender and say, this is the solution. We need you to do this. If you do this, we can do this. And if we can do this, you get repaid. We're happy. Everyone wins. And it's about creating that win-win. They might have to move down a bit. You might have to move up a bit. Like there's negotiation that happens there. The third key point is the lender's concerns. So lenders' concerns are always going to be around when you're going into these negotiations. Are we going to get paid back? If you can answer that, great. You've already come over their biggest hurdle. The second one is going to be, if we get paid back, are we going to lose any money? Or if we get paid back, are we going to take a hit? Again, solution driven. Yes, you're going to get paid back, but you might have to lose 10, 20 grand. Well, from a lender's perspective, if they lose 20 grand, is that going to be better than dragging it on for another 6 months, going through insolvency, going through repossession, spending legal fees, everything else? Would they be better off just losing 20 grand and moving on and being able to deploy those funds again? Because they'll make that 20 grand back pretty much immediately. So from a lender's perspective, a small hit is always going to be better than a long, drawn-out battle. And that's going to be their other concern is this going to turn into a long, drawn-out, convoluted process where it ends up sat in front of a judge? Like, they don't want to get to that point. So all of those concerns, they can all be answered individually. They've all got their own solutions. And it's just a case of, like we said previously, getting those solutions together and hitting each of those concerns one by one. And there'll always be room for negotiation, kind of no matter what. They're always going to have some wiggle room because most of what's been deployed is obviously going to be, or a good chunk of it is going to be interest. They can potentially take a hit on some of that interest. The other point, and again, I've kind of got some written notes here, but this one is a very key point, which is the do's and don'ts of negotiations. So I've been involved in two types of negotiations. So I've been involved, well, actually probably three types. So I've been involved in negotiations where the client lets the broker do the work. They are the best ones. I've been involved in ones where the client and the broker does the work. They work pretty well still, but they can get a little bit too many cooks spoil the broth. And I've been involved in ones where the client does the negotiation. Now, that can work, but what doesn't work is, and this is kind of the don't side of it, is don't go in there with an ego. And we have had one in particular who went in there with such a huge ego that it just killed the negotiations from day one. They went in with the biggest chip on their shoulder. I don't have to pay you back. Like, I'll just sink it. I'll just sink the company. Like, I'm not bothered. I don't care. Like, that's not a way to do negotiation. The most successful negotiations that I've been involved in is where we have gone to the lender, realizing that the lender is in a position of strength. Yes, Mr. Lender, we know you have the charge. We know you have personal guarantees. We know you have the debenture. We know that you could end this immediately. So we are coming to you cap in hand with a solution. Please hear us out. Here's the solution. Does that work for you? Yes or no? If it's a no, we go back to the drawing board, come up with another negotiation. Yes, if that works, great, wonderful. Let's move forward with that. Going in believing that you have the position of strength when you're having to renegotiate because everything's gone wrong midway, you're not in a position of strength. So you have to go in there, cap in hand, and unfortunately swallow your ego. That is unfortunately the way it has to be. Going in there with an ego, immediately the lenders are going to go, no, we want our full amount back. Because if you rub them up the wrong way, all they do is they go, well, actually, we didn't want the big, long, drawn-out legal battle, but actually you've pissed us off now. So actually we do fancy the big legal battle. Simple as, we want that. We're going to push for that. We don't want that. That's not what we want. So take ego out of it. That is the big first thing. Obviously, we mentioned it already. The big do of it is do have all of your solutions drawn up before you start negotiating, because lenders don't want to be sat there wondering what the exit actually is. They want solutions. They're busy. They just want to know straight away, right, okay, what have you got? Yeah, fine. You want to do this. You want to do that. You want to do that. Fine, great, okay, let's do that. They don't want to go into a Zoom call for an hour going, well, how do we get out of this? What are the options? How do we do this? How do we do that? How do we do that? They're just not interested in it. So they're the big do's and don'ts of the negotiation. So that big one about ego is just a massive one. And that leads nicely into the last one, which is how do you maintain that lender relationship even when you're renegotiating? And simply put, lenders don't mind negotiation if it is done kindly and respectfully and with solutions. Like, they're not bothered about anything else. They just want a solution that works for everyone. So for them, that relationship will stay good, it will stay kind, it will stay respectful, mutual respect, all of that kind of thing, if the negotiations are done in a tasteful way without ego and all of that kind of thing. So you don't really have to worry about maintaining that relationship, because realistically, it's going to stay maintained and in a good place as long as they feel like it's all being done sort of with win-win in mind. Go in there with ego, you'll lose the relationship, and then all of a sudden you've lost complete control of everything moving forward. So they're kind of my big key points about negotiating with lenders. Hopefully that's given you a few nuggets in there. I think the big one is about that ego side of things. And I think the other one is realizing that actually you can negotiate with lenders. Because I think everyone thinks that once you've signed the terms and everything else, like that's it fixed for the whole thing. There's room for negotiation. There's always room for negotiation. Don't take the piss with it. That's the simple thing. Don't midway through a development go, I just want to negotiate a couple of points off like that. It doesn't work like that. If you hit crisis point, that's where there's room for negotiation. So yeah, hopefully it's been helpful. If it has, like, share, subscribe, all of the good stuff on social media, YouTube, Spotify. Don't forget, obviously, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can leave comments. But otherwise, thank you so much for all your support, and I will catch you on the next one.